Hey guys, it's Mr. Denton. Miss you guys. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Thought it's a great time for me to start sharing some of my favorite books. This is a book I used to read with my sixth grade and fifth grade classes years ago. I haven't read it in a long time. So I'm going to start sharing it a chapter at a time with you guys. And I'm also going to be putting up some other videos where I would just teach you guys about history, kind of like what we would do in class. So here we are. Welcome to my game room. There's my Jordan collection on the wall behind me, hanging there on the door. There's my arcade games, and then we come around. There's my old school video game system. There's my other computer and my Xbox One, and then over there's my son's game station and some of my cars and things. Oh, and some cookies. Anyway, back to what we're here for. The book we're going to be reading is called Pirates: The Secret City. It's by Chris Archer. And we're going to do first chapter today, and it says it's a mysterious map. It's an underground adventure. This is the first. There are four books in this series. I really like this book because it's it's a bunch of kids getting together, teaming up, looking for a secret buried pirate treasure, and it's really fascinating. It takes place in a really old house in New York City, and I like old houses, so I think that's pretty cool. It's got to do with secret rooms and hidden maps, and it's kind of like the movie The Goonies if you've ever seen it. So let's get started. Chapter one is called The Dare. Hey, awesome party, George. Shannon Starling walked up to George Van Gelder and gave him a little punch in the arm. She ran her hand through her orange streak hair and then smiled as she looked around the small backyard, fenced in by an ivory colored brick wall. It was George's 11th birthday, and the party his dad had thrown for him was just winding down. Thanks, Shannon, George said with a shy smile. Too bad the diversions had to be cut short. Shannon grinned. Her band, the Diversions, had played at the party until the police showed up to investigate noise complaints. But Shannon didn't seem to mind. The Diversions were never happy unless someone complained about them. Shannon was right. George's party had been a smashing success. The normally sleepy New York backyard had been filled with lively guests, and piled high stacks of presents by the back door had grown sky high. Now most of the people were gone, and George felt tired but happy. The only guests left in the back garden were Shannon and George's friend Derek Wilson. The three sat down to relax, looking up at the evening sky. I'll make you a tape, Shannon promised. You don't have to do that, George said quickly. For his birthday, Shannon had already given him a mixtape full of songs. Thankfully, only one was by the Diversions. Actually, all of George's presents had been pretty good. The Diversions drummer, Renee, had given him a small flashlight. Derek had given him a really cool plastic camera. It took tiny pictures that developed themselves. But the best present had come from his father. It was a set of books about pirates. The books were thick with leather bindings and full of illustrations. George, came a voice from inside. Yeah, Dad. Peter Van Gelder stepped outside. He was wearing the world's stupidest pirate costume, a black and white striped shirt, huge three-cornered hat, an eye patch, and a plastic sword hanging from his belt. His costume had been the only embarrassing thing about the party. True, George had been obsessed with pirates since he was a little kid, but now he was 11 years old, and somehow his dad had never gotten the message that, George, you're too old to have costumes at your birthday parties. I've got to return this costume, his father said. Will you kids be all right? Yeah, sure. Okay, Peter Van Gelder said. See you in 35 minutes. He closed the door. Your dad's pretty cool, George, Shannon said with his footsteps fading. Very funny, George answered. No, I mean it, she insisted. He wore a better costume than Derek or I did. I don't know about that, Derek said, laughing. The orange streaks in Shannon's dark hair were day-glow. She had went for a refined punk look in faded jeans and a bright red jacket, her guitar case by her side. Yeah, that's funny, Derek, she said. I'm serious, George. You said your dad is boring, always reading musty old books, but he was so cool to throw this party, and he even dressed up like a pirate. You got to think about pirates, right? I was really into them when I was little, admitted reluctantly. George took a deep breath. Shannon Starling was one of the coolest kids in his school. He'd only gotten to know her a little bit this year, and he felt a little weird talking about his pirate obsession with her. I still read about him sometimes. It's kind of sweet that he did the pirate thing, then Shannon went on. Is it true that this used to be a pirate's house? George glared back at Derek. Derek must have spilled the beans. It had been a long time since he told anyone who had owned his house 300 years ago. How cool would that be to live in a house 300 years old that was owned by a pirate when it was new? Let's see, where were we? George had learned as a little kid that no one ever believed him. They just thought his pirate obsession was warping into his brain. Thanks a lot, Derek. Do you want me to tell Shannon about your collection of. Be quiet, Derek interrupted, alarm in his dark eyes. Come on, George, it's no big deal. You're always talking to me about it. About what? Shannon asked. She sounded like she really wanted to know. George looked over his shoulder. His father was long gone, but George wasn't sure what he was really checking for. Sometimes he felt another presence in the house. Some nights it felt like the first owner was still there watching over his old home. Well, my house is really old, he said, lowering his voice. Like how old? Shannon asked. Older than the United States. Derek snorted. It's in the United States, George. How can it be older? It was built more than 300 years ago, back when New York was a British colony, before the Revolution. Tell her who built it, Derek said. A famous pirate, she asked. Well, George said, actually, he wasn't a pirate. He was a privateer, which is like a pirate with a license. A pirate's license, Derek said. What did he have to do? Take a test when he turned 16? You guys are making this up, Shannon said. Pirate, privateer, whatever, Derek said. Tell her who. George looked over his shoulder again, feeling a familiar chill crawl up his spine. He lowered his voice even more, not wanting to say the name too loudly. Well, the name of the first owner of this house was William Kidd, Captain Kidd. Whoa, the Captain Kidd? Sharon whistled. I've heard of him. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. How do you know? Shannon asked. Because my mother was his wife's great 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 granddaughter. George counted them on his fingers. How many greats is that? 7. She was my great times 8 grandmother. Wow, so you're practically a pirate yourself, Shannon said with a smirk. Not really, George exclaimed. We're only related by marriage. He married my many times great grandma, but he's not my ancestor by blood. Okay, that's enough of the old family tree, Derek said with a laugh. But Shannon, she looked serious. And that house has been in your family that long? She asked. There must be all kinds of cool stuff here. Well, maybe in the attic, but I don't really go up there. What, are you kidding? She asked. You mean you've never been up there? George felt his cheeks turning red. Well, of course I've been up there, just not very often. He'd been up there only once, actually, when he was 5, and it was just a few weeks after his mother had died. He'd followed his father upstairs and knocked over a little pottery vase that his mother had given his father as a gift. The vase had shattered, and that was when his dad told him that he wasn't allowed up there anymore. George had never talked to his dad about the attic since. Shannon frowned. I bet tons of pirate artifacts are up there. I doubt it. Just old papers and stuff. Like treasure maps? Derek asked. No. Boring old papers. My dad's a history professor, not a treasure hunter. He's always talking about Eastern European political conflicts, like when there were czars and disputes between noble families. Pretty boring stuff, if you ask me. I still don't get why you don't go up there, Shannon said. George felt the color burn into his cheeks. Well, I'm not supposed to. Some of the stuff's old, and some of it was my mom's. I think we should go check it out, Shannon insisted. George bit his lip. It wasn't so much that he was scared of getting in trouble. It was something else that made him nervous to go into the attic. I don't know, he said. Come on, Shannon urged. We'll be careful. You want to see what's up there. You're in, right, Derek? Sure. Why not? Okay, George. It's 2 against 1, Shannon said. Do we have to dare you? So that was it. Betrayed by his best friend, George had no choice. Well, okay. We have to hurry, though, he said. My dad's coming back in half an hour, and he's never late. That's the end of chapter 1. And so in chapter 2, the kids are going to go up into the attic, and I'm not going to spoil it. We'll find out what happens tomorrow, but their adventure really starts tomorrow. So I hope you guys enjoyed the first chapter. I'll be recording the second chapter tomorrow and posting it, and I'll talk to you guys soon.